Everyone, let's wrap up May. May was kind of weird. I read a lot of books despite being super busy at work and really exhausted. But I also didn't sleep well, and there were quite a lot of bank holidays this year in May. So I guess that explains all the reading I did. I also uploaded quite a few videos again. Aside from my letter to May, I uploaded a reading vlog, a Discworld review, and also a series review. So let's dive right into the books and start with the physical books. I read Quartet. And I also talked about this one in the reading vlog in more detail. This is a book following a young woman who comes to Paris and with her husband, but then her husband kind of gets arrested and she's a little bit lost at what to do and gets taken in by artist friends. And then there goes, is it a love triangle or rather more love quartet? But I didn't see the love quartet, so not really sure about that. But she starts an affair with the husband of the artist couple and things go a little bit insane. It's a lot about relationships, about being in love, about being a mistress and being relied and manipulated by people. I talk more about it and in detail in the vlog. Overall, I enjoyed the writing, but I'm not sure I enjoyed the story. So I'm a little bit torn about that. But it's a rather quick read and I'm glad I read it. I'm also glad that I read the afterword afterwards, which gave us more background about the author and about the story itself. So I didn't know that. That helped me. But I wouldn't read that before reading the book, just after. The other physical book I read, I also reviewed in a video, and that's Monstrous Regiment. This is the 31st novel in the Discworld series, but you could also read this as a standalone. It is technically the third, I think, in the Industrial Revolution series, but the first three books there could all be read as standalones because there is a minimal connection between them. Why I think this is a good standalone is because it is set in a country that we haven't seen before. It is mostly centering around characters we haven't heard of before. There is some liminal connection to Ankh-Morpork and Commander Vines, who is part of the story, but he's just a side character. So what is this about? This is about a young woman dressing up as a boy to register for the army or the military, and she wants to find her brother, basically, who's either lost, a prisoner, or dead. And this is how the book starts, and we follow this young woman trying to fit in and being part of the military and finding her brother. It's a lot about a country that has been at war for ages and a country that has no ruler really because everybody thinks the ruler might be dead, and the country also has a sort of not really sane god who keeps adding abominations to their religious book. And it's hard to follow this religion now. That's why everybody is more or less praying to the political leader, the Duchess, who might be dead because she's over 90 and no one has seen her in years. So that's all part of this. What's really interesting about this book is see this character, this young woman who is living in this country that is riddled by war and has a clear idea of the place for women and how her life changes or the perspective people have of her as soon as she cut her hair and put on trousers and everybody thinks she's a boy. And this is a huge part of the story of how the society and the world regards boys and girls or men and women differently, and it's just no foundation for things like that. So I highly recommend this book just for the fun of the story, for the insights of the story about war, religion, and cross-dressing. Monstrous Regiment was a reread, and another book I reread was How to Marry a Werewolf. And if you haven't heard me talk about this before, it's a novella set in the Parasol Protectorate universe Gail Carriger created. It's following after all the books, basically. You don't really have to have read the books to understand this story, but you might get some spoilers for some characters if you want to read the Parasol Protectorate books first. But the story basically follows a young American woman who has gotten into trouble at home, and her parents sent her to London to basically catch a werewolf to marry. It's sort of thought as a punishment, but in America is not as werewolf friendly as London is. So in London, the werewolves are part of the ruling class. And it's rather fun to see her courting or getting in touch with the society that is basically different from her own upbringing, but also finds herself in a family that is completely different to her own family, and sees how it can be nice to be treated as a worthwhile person instead of just being ignored or being careful around her own mother. For me, this is a nice reread because it's a standalone and it always follows a fun story. It's a lot of banter, which I like, and it has a happy ending. Who doesn't like happy ending? And as you know, I do like the world that Gail Carriger created. As we're on rereads right now, let's talk about The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water. I listened to it this time, the last time I read it as ebook, and I really enjoyed it more the second time around. I basically wanted a short audiobook that I can listen in one go, and this one was for free on Audible for me, so I thought, why not reread this? And I really enjoyed the audiobook. I got a little bit more out of the story due to the reread. I'm trying to summarize the story, and I realize I still cannot put the plot into good words. I read the book before as an ebook, and I had the same problem there with summarizing what is actually going on. I remember that reading it, I was a little bit more bummed out with the female character that the group of bandits picked up, because it's this type of trope where you have a woman accompanying or deciding she's going to be part of a group, but is always in the way. But in the end, it's sort of what's bringing her together with one of the leaders of that group or the man she's following. And it's usually a trope I'm not particularly fond of, but I noticed that listening to the story again, first of all, the audiobook was really, really well done, but also that I could pick up on a lot of things that I missed or didn't really see the first time around that I read the book. So I can highly recommend this book. The writing is beautiful. I can also recommend the audiobook. Moving on to random things I cannot really talk about because I'm too stupid, is I finally finished listening to the great courses of No Excuses. It's a great course about existentialism, and I don't know why I keep trying to listen to things about existentialism and to read things about existentialism. I'm interested in it, but somehow halfway through I always lose momentum, and even though I took a break, I kind of couldn't follow anymore. A lot of the existentialism goes above my head, but I still want to know more. That's why I keep going back to it. So I think it's a good course, like most of the great courses are, but I can't tell you what existentialism is still. I cannot put it in words. Somehow it always falls out of my brain again. But I enjoyed listening to it, so that's part of it. Another lengthy audiobook I finished in May was The Lives and Opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman. I think that's the title. I always call it just Tristram Shandy, and I've been meaning to read this classic for ages. I talk a lot about this in the reading vlog as well. But I started it in university. It was a little bit complicated, and then I put it aside. I started it again, I think a few years ago, and put it aside again. And then I saw this as on Audible and thought maybe I'll just try the audiobook and then be done with it, because sometimes I just want to be done with the thing, and audiobooks really make me get through those big, dense classics. And that worked, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have made it through the book any other way. The story is Tristram Shandy wants to tell you about his life, and that's the premise he sets out. He wants to write books about his life, and he starts with his conception and all those things, but he keeps getting distracted. So most of this story or the book is different types of writing, different types of storytelling. I think from a literary aspect, this book is rather important, and it can be discussed into depth about a lot of things, but overall it's hard to follow the plot or the storyline because he keeps getting distracted. And he talks more about his Uncle Toby than his own life. And he never really gets to tell us his story about his life. It's just a little part somewhere there, but the main plot for me felt like he wants to talk about his father and his Uncle Toby and his Uncle Toby's adventures and things going on. Overall, I couldn't decide if the audiobook narrator was annoying or if he was annoying because the narrator of the book is annoying. So it was kind of an awful audiobook, but I think the book is also awful, and it is supposed to be funny, but I think only if you go at it as literary criticism and analyze it to death. and understand all the little snippets. I completely read some literary summary afterwards about all the chapters and what I wanted to do, and that made more sense, but on my own, I didn't see any of that. I was just glad I finished the book. Okay, let's end on happier notes. The last video I uploaded was a series review, and I finished the Windfolwer series in May. I read the first book in April and book 2, 3, 4, and 5 in May. The Windfolwer series is a series of novellas all about a little under 100 pages, following the Windfolwer family, who's a family of witches. The books each have a different protagonist or perspective of character they are following. Book 1, 2, and 5 have the same set of main characters, but 3 and 4 have a completely different main characters and main plotline in a different area, but they are still connected to the Windfolwer family and to the main characters of the other 3 novellas. So it's all connected somehow. It's very cozy, it's very low-key. They have a little issue to solve in each book. It's a little puzzle, but nothing is dramatic. It's really low-key. Even the solutions are, okay, now we found it and now it's done. It doesn't rely on cliffhangers, manipulation, and overall drama. A lot of the writing is the mundane daily life of the characters, following the characters and their troubles. They all have a queer romance at the center, but not in a dramatic, romantic way, but it's clear that there are 2 people who are getting together and that it's part of the story, and it is really cozy to read. The series was something that I could really use in May because it was stressless. It was so free of drama and confusion and cliffhangers, and I read most of it when I couldn't sleep, so I kept falling asleep a lot on it, but it never mattered. So I can highly recommend it if you're looking for some cozy queer fantasy. And the last book I finished was Yellowface. I listened to this on audio, and I basically think I listened to it in 2 or 3 sittings. It was highly captivating. This is the first book I read by the author, despite having been pushed the other books that she had written onto me by everyone almost. Babel is everywhere, everybody knows that. The Poppy Wars were also that. Would fall into my line of interest. Even Audible and Amazon always say, authors you've read also other people like these authors, and she's always among those. But I never really was interested in any of her other books. There was always something about them that put me off. Probably the length and the dark academia part and the violence in the Poppy Wars that I heard about. But anyway, Yellowface, I just read the synopsis when it was recommended to me on Audible, and I was like, this is something I'm definitely into. The book starts off with 2 friends who are both authors who are out celebrating and having some drinks and then going to one of the authors' home. And unfortunately, for some reason, one of the authors dies. Now, this is the kickoff of the story. Those 2 authors are friends since college, but they're completely different. One is a Chinese-American, very successful author. The other is, let's say, a standard middle American white woman who writes about herself, but nobody's interested in her books. So while one is very successful, the other is not. They maintain a strange kind of friendship, but we only see everything from the white woman's perspective. And I was captivated by her voice from the beginning, because most of the time she sounds very jealous and is one of those, I deserve this, I'm entitled for this. She really shows that she has not the best opinion of her friend and her books and the success she has. And this is going on throughout the novel, because yes, the start is rather dramatic with one of them dying, but the Chinese American author had a quirky way of writing. She never told anyone about what she was writing while she was working on it. And she just finished her next novel. So the manuscript was only there in paper because she doesn't use a computer. She just used a typewriter and only types it out. So the raw manuscript was finished. And the white author takes it home and thinks, oh, this is really good. She enjoys it and wants to publish it. But instead of going, I want to return it to the family and that it can be published under the other author's name, she decides, I'll refine it, I'll edit it. And then she turns it somehow into her own book. And she starts believing that she wrote it. And gets a publisher, and all of a sudden she gets successful. And that's where the Yellowface comes in, because the publisher thinks it will be more successful, the book will be more successful if they highlight or make things a little bit more confusing, and then the author looks a little bit more Asian American. So what it all comes down to, the book gets very successful, but sooner or later people discover that she's not Asian descent, that she is basically white, and they see similarities to the Chinese American author's writing, and they start throwing around ideas of plagiarism, and there's a lot of upheaval going on. The book is always written from the perspective of the white author, and we see her torn between this is right, this is wrong, but also justifying her actions. And she still always comes across as envious and entitled, and never really feeling guilty about what she did. She's not understanding what she did wrong. And this book looks really at the publishing industry, also a lot of references to the book TikTok, Twitterverse in the publishing, cancellation of authors, and different scandals that we might have heard of, but I think other people who are not involved in the online bookish world may have not. But I really enjoyed the writing, I really enjoyed the pace, and I really enjoyed the ending as well. It really kept me glued to my audiobook, and out walking, I couldn't stop listening. So it was a good first book for me of this author to read, because I really, really enjoyed it. And since my battery is flushing, let's rush this to an ending. I hope you also had a great reading month in May. Tell me in comments what you've read, if you're interested in one of the books that I've talked about, or if you've read them, what you thought about them. And I hope June will be a little bit more relaxed for all of us and full of good books. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.